Hey, it's me. Thank you all so much for tuning in to our memorial for Scott Adams. And it's a heavy day. I heard the news, like many people, from Coffee with Scott Adams. I was listening in, and the moment I saw Shelley's face, I had a very strong feeling in that moment about what she was about to say. It's a heavy day, but I think there's a lot of things we can reflect on that are positive. I know that Scott Adams would want us to be positive, and I'm just wanting to get from you guys right away what your immediate thoughts are. Mine are an incredible man has left this earth, but he has left an archive of ideas, concepts, techniques, things that can be used and will be used for years to come. But I want to hear from you guys. What's on your hearts and minds?
I'm very sad that he's gone, and I don't know. I don't want to say that I feel lost because I don't feel lost as a person, but as far as a media person who can tell us what the media is trying to do to trick us, I don't know who's next, and I do feel lost in that regard. Are we on our own now? Was it that type of analysis? Is that gone for a period of time? Rush Limbaugh, I was always aware of his mortality, whether he was or not, and I was always wondering who will replace Rush Limbaugh, and I didn't know. And then Scott Adams kind of came up, and I thought, oh, it's going to be Scott Adams. And sure enough, he did fill the Rush Limbaugh space as far as how everything is hypnotizing us and how we should react to it. But now I don't know what's next. He died 2 years younger than Rush Limbaugh. Rush Limbaugh was 70. So, and I don't know who's next. So I guess it's up to us.
Yeah. And Wyatt?
Well, I'm glad that you brought up the point about Rush, Robert, because I mean, I too it was just a jolt of emotion right when I saw the news, and it was so just saddening because when someone's very ill for a long time, um, you think, okay, well, it won't be as much of a surprise when the inevitable happens, but it still felt like that because even to the end, you still wanted him to make it through and whatever alternative treatments could have helped. I know that even all the way up to the president's office, they were trying to expedite everything, even recording well up into the end, which I think is magnificent accomplishment in and of itself. But I think what we've learned in the past couple years, when you lose somebody, whether it's a Rush Limbaugh, whether it's to go about the same, even further back, an Andrew Breitbart, when you lose a Charlie Kirk, and when you lose a Scott Adams, there is no replacement. And I think that that's a testament to the role that individuals like Scott play. They're one of a kind. And these individuals come into our lives and come into the public consciousness. And in a way, we almost don't appreciate them until they're gone and you notice their absence. And so I think with someone who's so much of a talent as he actually was, and I think somebody who really, I mean, I think with all those individuals, there's a very large and curious mind trying to understand the world around them, trying to understand people around them, and ultimately with a goodness in their heart of wanting the best for others and for them to improve their own lives and have happy and successful lives. It's rare that you see people who have really sort of reached the highest level of self-actualization of someone like a Scott. And, he'll be very, very missed.
Definitely. He will definitely be very missed. And what you were saying about him wanting to go on today, I mean, that is just extraordinary. There was a guy that I interviewed years back, and I am not in any way intending to belittle him, but he was talking about a show, and he said, we have this expression, the show must go on. And he said, a show is a show. It should maybe go on and it shouldn't. And I remember him saying that, and I thought, what kind of a what kind of a work ethic is that? What kind of a fire do you have in your belly for what you're doing? And I think about Scott today and in undeniable pain and exhaustion and saying, I want to go on the air. And I think, which one would you rather be?
I think you have to go on the air. I think that's
Yeah.
that's the you go out with your boots on. I think there's a lot to be learned from that.
Absolutely. Well, you know, there's so many things that he's done. As I said, he's left us this incredible, incredible library of recordings, which I'm sure that are going to be put into text. They're going to be made into books. There's just a wealth of knowledge. It's an embarrassment of riches. Scott, podcasting or live streaming, however you want to call it, every single day. Incredible work ethic. What do you all think will be Scott's most enduring legacy? He's done so many different things and worked up until the very end of his life. What do you all think?
I think I've gotten brainwashed into the be helpful attitude that he left behind. Even Dilbert is helpful because it calls out the stupidity of the corporate workplace. I'd like to think that Dilbert would go on, but they canceled him so hard. I don't know if they're going to run a archived Dilbert the way they do Charlie Brown in newspapers. And I think that's what's going to live on, the idea of being helpful and being useful until your very end.
Yeah. What about you, Wyatt?
I agree with you, Robert, that, at the time, Dilbert was one of those things that was just ubiquitous. And so every day you had the strip in the paper, and it was such an important satirization of the ridiculousness of workplace and office culture. We've seen, especially in the past few years with COVID and beyond, that that's sort of become the predominant culture. Now it's an HRification of just society in general. And so I think that who better to satirize and speak on that than Scott? But I think the greatest takeaway from him, unlike many other commentators who I think can also be interesting or incisive, was that with him, it was not a all hope is lost. It was not a these things are happening to you and you're a victim now of society, of the situation. It was not a doom. It was a, okay, here's how you navigate through this situation. Here's how you deal with those types of people. Here's the way that you present yourself in a conversation. Here are reframes so that you can think about things differently. That is almost unheard of in the current culture. In fact, one of the rare personalities I can think of that does anything similar to that is someone like a Dennis Prager, who's also going through his own health struggles. And so it's very unique to have a voice like that, where it's not just the negative, and there's a positive too. It can be okay. You can do the work to make it okay. And when I think about a Rush, when I think about a Breitbart, when I think about a Charlie Kirk or something like that, I think of that similar sort of happy warrior mentality of it's not all doom and gloom. It's not all everything's gone to hell. It's, yeah, things are really bad. And there's aspects of society that desperately need to change. And there's people out there who don't have your best interests at heart, but here's how you handle it. And so I think that those lessons are what will continue generations to come, because they speak to real home truths in human nature.
Well, I think I've always tried to have at the other end of my mic a person or people who are smarter than me. So I have you both here for a reason. You have great answers to those questions. I think that Scott really, really has left behind a multitude of people, dozens upon dozens of de-hoaxers. We are now trained, our brains will look at a headline or look at a clip on the news, and we will be able to, almost in superhuman time, we will be able to see what looks like a hoax, and we will investigate and dig a little more, and we will have more and more people who will be challenging the legacy media and finding these hoaxes, which are prevalent, and they are trying to push them even today. So that's my take on that. Now, Scott did have a very unique perspective about everything, whether he was talking about health, politics, the media, dating, eating, drinking. I mean, he gave it all. How do you think he has influenced your own thinking in your lives?
I think the reframe is something that I think about all the time. As soon as I start catastrophize, I can't say that word, but I think about it. Catastrophize or catastrophize, is that what the word is? I'm going to use it anyway because I think we all know what I mean. And I reframe stuff all the time. I reframe work. Oh, work is boring. No, I am a monk doing a practice at work, and this is my work practice. And that makes it better. And I think about things being too on the nose. If it sounds too good to be true, then it is. That's a helpful thing. He kind of was an internet dad. He seemed like a father figure, and it wasn't just me saying it. Many people said it, and then he kind of embraced it. He kind of giving you those life lessons. And there are things that I'm more cautious about now. The alcohol is poison thing is helpful. So, I don't have to feel pressured to drink when I'm out with friends. I can just say, no thanks, not interested or whatever. And you can do it with other things like these peppermints at work that I just can't stop eating. I'm gonna have to start thinking, these things are poison, when you're having so many of them. So that the reframe is a helpful change. And he said this, and I'll always remember it. When you reframe or rewire or think different, you actually create a physical structure in your brain. That's a real physical thing that happens. And knowing that, even if it's directionally true, even if some scientists would say, you don't actually do that, like if one day they were to say that, it's still like knowing that, oh wow, I've just like built a little brain muscle. It helps you to, feel like you're in reality and not just in digital land.
That's a very good answer, Robert. That probably would have been my first, is the concept of the reframe, and really, in a sense, realizing how much power you do have over your own mind and not letting it sort of be beholden to just feelings or your environment around you. Being able to, I mean, there's a concept that I learned a long time ago, but has always stuck with me. But if you're going through a tough time, or you're, depressed or angry or sad or whatever the situation is, the one thing that's always helped me pull out of it is always stopping and stepping outside your own head and saying, it's just chemicals. There's just chemicals at work right now. And it really demystifies, everything kind of going. It's like, okay. Now, when you're really happy, you don't want to think that way. But, when you're down, it helps. But it's true. Regardless, it's just chemicals, and you are in control of, sort of the balance of what's going on there. So I think that that's an important lesson from Scott, is the reframe. I think almost in the way that he lived his life, I take a great lesson as well. And I think it's in, Scott was judging, especially by the obituaries that came out today in some of the mainstream, like the New York Times. He was one of the first people who was, in essence, canceled and yet survived. And so I think there's something to be said for that durability. They come for your strip, they come for your, the very valuable merchandise, intellectual property, and all the things around who you are. They call you a racist, they do everything like that. And all for stating, some, now in retrospect, very harmless, basic statements of fact, just statistical analysis, nothing beyond anything that Steve Saylor's ever said. I think that the fact that you can then have another life after that and be able to be so beloved. Because I think that there was probably a timeline where the Scott Adams who made a comic would have had a less acerbic obituary in the New York Times, and people by and large just said, oh yeah, the Dilbert guy. Oh, that's sad. I remember his comics in the newspaper, and then moved it along with any other sort of below the headline celebrity passing. No, this is a man who actually had a positive impact on the lives of millions of people, and was able to talk to them every day, and was able to leave them with a better sense of purpose and a way to navigate the difficulties of life. And so I think from that's an exceptional lesson, is how, just when you think that it's darkest and, that everything's over, there's an opportunity to make something new and even better.
Speaking of his cancellation, when it first happened, he said that he had FU money. And he might have said FU, or he could have said the actual F word, but I think he said FU money. I've got FU money. Then he also talked about his index funds every once in a while, and I think he might have been influenced by that book, The Simple Path to Wealth. I just read that. I don't know, have either of you read it?
I have not.
Well, it was released 10 years ago. It just got revised and re-released, but not revised much. And the goal of the book is to have FU money, so that if you're put in a situation that you don't agree with, then you can keep things on your own terms and, tell them to kick rocks and go off and do your own thing. And it recommends index funds, and one particular, VTSAX. I think it's like Vanguard something stocks or whatever. So I don't know if Scott Adams was influenced by that book, but when I was reading the book, I couldn't help but think, I've heard all of this from Scott. So I don't know if that's something that, and he always took an idea. He took ideas and told everyone else about them too. I heard this, or this is the concept that people have been talking about.
Yeah, he's going to be remembered, I think, in years to come as like our Dale Carnegie, that kind of character of giving people really, really useful things that they can use. You know, I can't really think of a specific thing that, you know, changed my perspective other than this. And I'll credit you, Robert, for getting me into Scott Adams. But something that I saw you do again and again and again is either you or I would come up against a roadblock or a negative situation, and immediately it was like reframe, and it almost looked like a proverbial somersault back into the upright position. You know, I recall when we were invited to that South Carolina election night thing, and I had an interview with Caroline Levitt, and it got canceled. It was like this huge blow off. And immediately Robert was like, well, that's great because that gives us an opportunity to fill in the blank. And I've seen you do that so many times. And so what that all means is as long as you are breathing, you have everything you need pretty much. You can always make the most out of any situation. And that has changed my life many, many times. And it's wonderful when I've been in a bad situation, like my tire blows out, and I'm like, it's fine. It is fine. Believe me, it's fine. And I think anybody can do that. It's all about mindset or reframes, if you will. Now, there have been many, many moments that Scott Adams has shared with us all because he has consistently broadcast himself, but he's also appeared on many shows, done some
I'm
incredible
sorry,
things.
guys.
Oh yeah,
She's making an appearance.
that's Emmy.
Yeah. Scott Adams said that dogs, it's like they're part of podcast appearances, and she won't leave me alone. I'm sorry about that.
Don't apologize for that. And I always tell people when I'm interviewing them, if the dog or a cat walks into the frame, it's a bonus. It is. It's a bonus. Or
That's
I
a
also like,
reframe.
it's a reframe, like little kids walking into the set to ask for, you know, a cookie or something. It's wonderful. It's real life, which was what Scott was all about. But you know, he had all these different moments that were on Coffee with Scott Adams. They were in his comic strips. They were in his appearances elsewhere. Do you all have a favorite moment that perhaps really captured his essence and what he was all about?
I can't think of one right now.
I can share one while you guys are thinking. Okay. One of my favorite appearances he ever did was when he was on Bill Maher right after he was saying that he thought Trump was going to win or he thought Trump was incredible. And Bill Maher was saying, listen to all these things that he said. He said this and this and this. And like, Scott, don't you agree that this is terrible? And Scott just said, oh, that's excellent persuasion. And I've watched that over and over and over again because it's like, here's somebody saying something and you expect everybody to say, yeah, well, maybe you shouldn't have said that because that's the way people talk. I agree with what this person said, but I regret the way in which they said it. That's a common thing that you say. But Scott just said, no, that's great. That's great. Like this is why Trump is going to win, actually. And you don't get it. And the proof is in the pudding.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, he didn't do that mealy mouth back and forth support of Donald Trump, which was refreshing. And in
Right.
saying, and that anecdote reminds me, I think of my favorite moment. And that was one, I used to watch him almost every Sunday. I don't know if that's when he first started or if that was the best show or what. No, because Trump would tweet early Sunday morning and he had all these tweets on Sunday and he would take over the press. And one morning, Scott was just talking and laughing about Donald Trump's tweet. And then in the comments, Scott realized that Donald Trump had written a rap. And then he was laughing and crying and taking his glasses off, and he asked everyone to rap the tweet and make a video. And he retweeted our videos. He retweeted mine. That was on my old account. the media covered our raps, and the rap that Donald Trump wrote was, "Would somebody please tell Jay-Z that because of my policies, black unemployment has just been reported to be the lowest rate ever recorded." And 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 it was like a snafu. You get 20,000 likes on a tweet and hundreds of new followers. It was fun and it was generous.
I love that. I would have to say, I mean, there's so many that come to mind, especially with his broadcasts. I liked even he was doing one of the many racial grievance moments that we've had in the past few years, and I can't remember specifically which one it was. But it was one of those situations where he'd been shouted at for, weeks and months for talking about crime statistics. And he just comes online with the next broadcast, and I just see, like, oh, I click over and I see it live. And it was like some information came out finally about, like, who actually did the crime. And it was kind of similar to what happened this past, week with the ICE shooting about having the video. And now it's like, well, turns out that the prevailing media narrative was wrong about the situation. And he just had the biggest grin on his face because he knew, because he was very smart and he had created these very smart, almost kind of like a Coulter's Law thing about crime and things like that. And he knew exactly what happened in the situation. And so he just came on just with, it was like a kid, just like grinning ear to ear with the big coffee mug. And it was just kind of like and I'll never forget that, because it was just like one of those things where he captured such a complex but specific emotion right in that moment of, it's not even just being proven right. It's something where it's like, leaned into what should be a basic understanding of human nature. And so many people who talk in so many words were completely wrong about the situation. And so I just love that.
Yeah, and his grin and his laugh it was great when he was really, really laughing about something. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh. Sometimes dad can be like the biggest kid in the house. And, everybody said that Scott Adams was the internet dad, but he was also like a big kid in some ways. Like when he would say something kind of mischievous and look into the camera, and it was like, you all got that, didn't you?
Yeah. Did y'all ever see his attempted deprogramming of Michael Ian Black?
I didn't see that.
No.
Yeah, well, because they had the same agent or something, or manager. Michael Ian Black agreed to let Scott deprogram him. And so they did this interview, and Scott was going to try out his theories with the different hoaxes. And spoiler, Michael Ian Black was a complete ass. He wasn't taking it seriously. Scott, and I didn't, like, it was making me cringe a little bit by how I was cringing at Michael Ian Black, because he was, what do you mean by the word, in like a one word out of your sentence? What do you mean by deprogram? Well, I'm just going to try to help unravel your belief system. What do you mean by unravel? Like that situation. And I didn't know how Scott was going to handle it, but he had this nice placid smile. And he said, "I can't tell right now if you're just bullshitting me, if you're just pretending you don't understand things on purpose." And it went on for a while, and Michael Ian Black was not deprogrammed. He was obnoxious. But
Which is
I thought,
sad, because Michael Ian Black's not a stupid person. And
ugh,
he's like, he's also, I think he plays the role of liberal, but I think he's more conservative than he lets on. I mean, he's a friend of Meghan McCain's and has been for a long time, but
mm,
it's sort of interesting how, up against an intellect like Scott's, like, he almost felt probably intimidated. So he played like the sort of glib liberal.
yeah, maybe. I think of it as like when Bill Maher was deprogramming, is her name pronounced Anna, the one from Young Turks?
Anna Kasparian.
Anna Kasparian,
Yes,
yeah.
Anna. And he kept on going back and forth. Well, which country would you live in? Where would you wear that dress? You're wearing that dress. What dress would you wear that in? Like
This
she
dress?
was, yeah,
Yeah.
she was intellectually honest in letting Bill Maher persuade her, and Michael Ian Black wasn't. I would have liked for Michael Ian Black to have been that open-minded, But that's what Scott was trying to do. But look, he started something that a couple of years later, then Bill Maher started doing.
Right. And now has the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
What is the word that you think of when you think of Scott Adams? The first word that comes to my mind over the last few months has been resilient.
That's a good one.
It's a good one.
Yeah. I think of coffee. I just think of coffee.
Yeah.
I think of having the sip, and then I think about what the coffee does to my brain. I think, wow, I'm getting my brain juice.
Right.
I mean, I know that it almost sounds trite, but I think with him, the first word that comes to mind is just intellect. I mean, just raw, sheer intellect, and the likes of which you don't see shared often, especially on social media. And so we were very blessed to have him for as long as we did.
He had an incredible intellect. He was extremely, extremely resilient and unflappable, going and going and going, which is something that coffee can help you do, I have found. Coffee stimulates both of those things. But I want to thank both of you, Wyatt and Robert, for coming on here and just spending a few minutes to pay tribute to a great, great man.
It was my pleasure.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you both. God bless.
I receive it.